Please welcome Vice President, Worldwide Public Sector, AWS, Max Peterson.
Hello. How's everybody doing? It's been a good day? That's awesome. Well, we're going to try and make it a good wrap-up session here today. I'm super excited about this coming session. I hope you all are as excited as I am. My name is Max Peterson. I run our worldwide public sector group where we serve the missions of government, education, not-for-profits, healthcare, aerospace, and satellite. So it's a great collection of customers. In the next bit of time that we've got here, I want to share some quick sort of recap and announcements on our way to getting two very inspiring industry leaders, where we'll get a chance to have a conversation about their perspectives and firsthand experiences in paving the way for innovation. Hopefully, this will spark ideas for all of you on how you can help lead and push the boundaries in your organizations so that you can reimagine what's possible and continue to create the future ahead that we want. So let me go ahead and reflect on a couple of exciting efforts. Hopefully everybody was in the keynote this morning. That was pretty good? Yeah? Well, over these past few years, we've seen tremendous innovation amongst our customers. It was out of necessity. What used to take years to accomplish was getting done literally in days or weeks. And organizations proved that they were able to build solutions rapidly on AWS that simply weren't possible on their legacy IT systems. And those organizations that had started early or moved fast developed very strong digital foundations that in fact served them better to be able to continue that rapid innovation, to be able to maintain continuity, and in fact, to develop a sense of resilience that no matter what came at them, they had the tools to be able to adjust and respond. Now, as we move out of the pandemic and into whatever our next new normal is going to be, it's going to be critical that organizations continue adapting to meet the needs of their new constituents, be they students, be they citizens, be they consumers, be they businesses, all while ensuring that you keep on building the necessary foundations and tools for your organizations so that you can continue to adapt. Customer-centric innovation, as you know, is a leading principle at AWS, and we listen to and we continue to innovate based upon what our customers need. And it's that sort of inspiration that many of us saw amongst our customers as they figured out how to navigate through this pandemic period. And I think what's most interesting is how many of them are building on that success and thinking much bigger about what the future has to offer. One example is in our aerospace and satellite area, where organizations are now leveraging the cloud to be able to do faster decision-making on efforts from space, ranging from sustainability, environmental management, or defense capabilities. Today, I'm excited to be able to announce that AWS has successfully run compute and machine learning services on an orbiting satellite in space in collaboration with our partners, D-Orbit and Unibap. It's a first-of-its-kind mission. We developed this experiment using AWS software that was integrated onto Unibap's space-qualified hardware and then launched in January on board a D-Orbit satellite. And this has been over 10 months where we've been performing the data analytics in space on board the satellite and then delivering insights directly to scientists and engineers. AWS has worked with these two partners to build AI, ML, and IoT greengrass services right into the Unibap processor. And what this allowed us to do was then process massive amounts of raw satellite data to be able to shrink it in size or be able to actually perform onboard image analytics. And all of that led to faster download, decreased costs, and faster decision making. Exactly what we're all about. To help our customers get a better idea of what's helping in space, we did a project recently with a coalition of AWS partners. We called it Project Argus. This was a centralized digital platform that's now available as ready-to-go software on the AWS Marketplace that allows customers to be able to choose from multiple different space data sources, from multiple different analytic tools and models, and multiple different analysis software integration options so that you can get a configuration that delivers space situational awareness on demand, tailored to your exact needs. Now, this is an example about space and satellites, but imagine how fast that'll let you move and deliver custom services pretty much for any type of industry application. Project Argus is also interesting because it directly aids decision makers to be able to provide them with the timely and actionable intelligence that they need to be able to address circumstances in space today, but also, more importantly, draw insights and conclusions about opportunities that exist that we don't even know about today. In another area, healthcare, the cloud's driving improved patient outcomes by increasing efficiency, enhancing clinician and patient experiences, and providing the insights and the tools needed, all in a secure environment that helps to ensure patient privacy. And so I asked if many of you saw Adam's keynote today, where he launched Amazon Omics, which is our new purpose-built service for healthcare and life sciences organization that supports large-scale analysis and enables collaborative research that drives insights from genomics and other biological data. Amazon Omics allows organizations to set up their own custom workflow definitions, gives them the tools, and then allows them to run specific analytics, all with the click of a button, right? A couple of mouse clicks away from being able to get patient-level insights, where you can help to improve patient-level diagnostics, provide better patient-level treatments, and identify cures for diseases. So it's an astounding way to be able to put a lot of data to work to be able to deliver more personalized outcomes. We also just recently launched in our healthcare space 2 new capabilities. They're part of Amazon HealthLake, including imaging and analytics. So Amazon HealthLake Imaging is a HIPAA-eligible capability that makes it easy to store, access, and then analyze medical images at petabyte scale and at reduced cost. Amazon HealthLake Analytics allows the organizations to derive insights from multimodal health data and then share it securely. These new capabilities are literally helping to unify these siloed data environments that we've had in the health arena and then be able to put that information to work faster for clinical benefit to support patients and to improve the quality of care, as I said, while also reducing costs, in this case by as much as 40%. Not to be left out, we've seen our government customers leveraging the cloud to be able to get the resilience that they need to keep workloads safe and to maintain citizen support of critical applications during critical times, be they emergency, be they pandemic response, or be they unexpected events that you suddenly just have to react to. As always, security is our top priority, and organizations in government trust AWS as a result of our long heritage of running sensitive workloads across the spectrum. In fact, we recently announced something that we call Continuity of Government IT on AWS. And it now helps governments to protect their digital assets and services in the face of disruption or interference. The solution guide enables governments to be able to maintain control and integrity of their critical databases, back up their applications, and then be able to transfer services seamlessly to run in the cloud. And it reduces the risk of compromise and provides that continuity of operations that's essential. We had the Vice Minister of Ukraine and Minister of Digital Transformation, Mikhail Fedorov, at the conference today, who told the story firsthand about how he lived through the disruption and then came out with a digital capability that in fact is world leading now. As organizations continue to transform, keeping your employees trained is important. And we just signed a strategic agreement with the UK Ministry of Defence to help them focus on advancing digital skills across the department and through the British Armed Forces. The agreement is the first of its kind globally that will then provide a training framework for the UK MOD so that they can upskill defense leaders and personnel at over 2,000 different locations, helping to be able to sustain the military and business advantages of the organization. And I'm actually super excited to be able to talk about another way that we encourage customers to be able to push the boundaries and put ingenuity to work. We created a program called the AWS Imagine Grant in 2018, and this funds US-based nonprofits who are using cloud technology to solve some of the world's most pressing problems. Since the launch of the program, we've awarded more than $6 million to 66 nonprofit organizations, all in support of their technology-driven innovation. And today, I'm excited to announce that we're supporting a brand new cohort of winners using AWS to deliver on their missions. Please join me in congratulating the 20 nonprofit grant winners on the screen over here. All of these organizations came to us with really big, innovative ideas, trying to solve complex problems, ranging from advancing research and treatment for pediatric AIDS to better understanding and preventing veteran suicide. And it's that kind of innovation and that kind of thinking that we're really proud to be able to support with these types of grants, particularly for these types of these world changers who are using the cloud to drive progress. These are just a few of the exciting advancements that really demonstrate the sort of ingenuity and capability that many customers, partners, businesses, and governments have using cloud services. And none of this, however, none of this would be possible without strong leadership. It takes that vision. It takes that ability to drive, to deliver results. It takes the endurance to pave the way, to do things that are different and innovative and not like the others. And so without further ado, let's welcome our speakers to the stage and kick off the fireside chat session. So if you would, please turn your attention to the short video for a quick introduction of our speakers today.
One of the most important things I've learned in life is that achieving your goals is not always a straight path. As a child, growing up on a farm, looking at countless stars, I was imprinted with a desire to explore. I have been an astronaut for 22 years. I was the first female commander on the International Space Station. I have more than 60 hours of spacewalk time, more than any woman in the world. And I have more time in space cumulative than any other U.S. astronaut. I'm probably most proud of actually becoming chief of the astronaut office, the first female non-military, because I had never even imagined that I could. You have to define yourself by what you can do and not by what you think you can't, and never underestimate yourself.
When you look at the phrase, the American dream, there's no other country that has a dream affixed to its name. And when you look at what New York has stood for historically for many, it's the start of that dream. Growing up, the catalyzing moment for me, it was when we got the first computer in the house. The wonder of how it actually works sort of intrigued me. So I found myself with a screwdriver, taking the computer apart, looked inside, and the rest of it looked like a puzzle. And before I knew it, the computer was in pieces. Needless to say, when my dad came home from work, he challenged me, said, put that thing back together. And of course, I got the computer back together to his surprise. And that started my journey into tech. When we look at dreams and goals, and we look at where technology can help support those, we can't lose focus on the what that we're actually trying to accomplish. For me, it was about making tech decisions that would ultimately impact quality of life and life safety in the city. When I think about what it means to be a New Yorker, it means to be resilient, strong, empathetic, and strongly motivated about building a better future for yourself and also for your family.
Thank you both for joining us here today. I love those introductions. They're super exciting. They're super inspiring. And they give us all a glimpse of the careers that you've had, but not the same glimpse that we can get sort of hearing some of your personal highlights. And so if we can, Peggy, let's start with you. Tell us about a couple of those key leadership highlights or personal experiences that shaped.
Well, I think growing up on a farm actually shaped me a lot. There's a lot of hard work and dedication required just to accomplish anything, and so I think that was pivotal. And I hate to date myself, but when I was 9, I watched Armstrong and Aldrin walk on the moon, and I thought, wow, cool job. I'd like to have that one. And it became a dream, and that dream stayed alive. And when I graduated high school, that was the first year NASA selected female astronauts. And so for me, it changed. It wasn't a dream anymore, it was a goal. So that was really important to me. I went ahead and got a bachelor's and a PhD in biochemistry, and I started applying, and I started actually working at NASA immediately, but it was another 10 years of rejections before I finally made it to being an astronaut. And again, that dedication, that maybe stubbornness kept me in there, that farm stubbornness kept me going. And, but I learned a lot on that path. Getting to where I wanted wasn't a straight line, but in looking back, I can say it was those 10 years that enabled me to later be selected as the first female commander on the space station and become the first female and non-military chief of the astronaut office. So those were kind of some of the things behind the scenes.
That's diversity. You know, adversity is something I think we all face, and when you take it and turn it from a challenge into a strength, it's a great story. And I agree, our paths, our milestones, our careers are not always straight lines. And I know that Matt here has had a couple of different jobs en route to the current position you've got. What would you share, Matt?
Yeah, so I think very much like Peggy in the beginning, like when I look at my journey, it started with a game of survival. So I think in the intro reel, you heard the story about me taking a computer apart. What you didn't hear about that is we got the first computer in the house, and I think this was my first big success. My dad brought it home, he went to work, and 2 working parents, my grandparents watched me during the day. I found myself with a screwdriver, and I took that computer that he just bought and broke it into pieces. So when he came in the door, needless to say, he wasn't very happy about that, right? And he said, "You better get that computer back together." Now, the part that was omitted from that story, he's like, "And if you don't get that computer back together, you won't be all the way together." And I was like, oh, all right, so it's nothing like a game of survival to sort of pull yourself together, right? So he went to work the next day, he came back, and needless to say, that computer was pulled back together. Came in, he hit the power button, and this was back in the day where you had to type win.exe to launch Windows, and it was like, all right, it's back together. That same night, he added a lock to that door, but that started my journey into tech. So from there, I think my journey and like the path that I've taken has always been around helping people, right? And what can we do to move the needle forward in terms of substance? So prior to becoming the CTO for the city of New York, I was Deputy Police Commissioner in the NYPD, where I led the technology and strategy arm for how we dealt with crime conditions in the city. Prior to that, I was at the Mayor's Office of Housing Recovery after Hurricane Sandy, getting folks that were disrupted or their homes were destroyed back into homes, leading construction programs and building a system that took $4.5 billion from the federal government and put it back into the hands of those that were impacted. And then prior to that, I was doing a number of things that were around the tech space. So both building applications, building systems, and network engineering, a bunch of other stuff. But I think along the lines, all the accomplishments in the journey has taught me one thing consistently, is that if you focus on the things that you actually care about and you focus on a mission that moves you, it all seems to work itself out. And along the journey, by focusing on the things that I love and helping people, I was at the NYPD the youngest person appointed to ever be, the youngest person to be a commissioner, youngest CTO in the history of the city, first black CTO in the history of the city. And you know, we'll see where else the journey goes, but wherever it is, it'll be around people.
It sounds like both of you had equal parts inspiration and perspiration, hard work. In fact, yours might have been induced by your dad's strong encouragement to put it back together.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that is common among many leaders, particularly those who have been leading some of these digital transformations, is that you take advantage of the circumstances and you help drive change. And in the space industry in particular, we're on the precipice of some massive changes. So moving from a space industry where it was largely driven by governments and very large organizations to one that's now driven by the opportunities that number in the tens of thousands of organizations that are participating in commercial space opportunities. And so I'm super interested, Peggy, as we're on this precipice of change, you know, what you observe in terms of different ways of doing work or examples of when you and your team had to think differently or think big about accomplishing a goal.
Yes, there's, as you said, so many things out there now. People are really interested in space, but more importantly, people are investing in space now. And I think that's going to make a huge change, hopefully to continue this big exponential change of volume. You know, not only do we have tourists going on suborbital flights and we have access to low Earth orbit, we have the government paying for commercial cargo and commercial crews to go to the International Space Station. And the company I work for now, Axiom Space, is going to be building the first commercial space station, along with several other companies that are out there also planning to build commercial space stations. And I think each of those stations will fill a different niche. It's going to be exciting to see what comes of that. But I think, you know, that expansion in space, and if you think about all that data from the experiments and everything, it's going to continue to expand and exponentially.
Yes.
I think from examples of, you know, big accomplishments, you know, the International Space Station is probably one of the biggest. And since you guys are a bunch of nerds, you probably do know that the International Space Station has been up there for more than 22 years now, and we've learned a lot in that time. And the station itself was built and constructed in the vacuum of space, orbiting at 17,500 miles an hour with piece parts from all around the world. And they'd never been fit checked on the ground. And we were putting them together in space. And I consider that pretty much miraculous that we got it to work. But it's an engineering marvel and an international accomplishment of what you can do when you work together. So I think that's one of the big ones. But then there's just the everyday things that guys learn from, like the fact that control moment gyros that maintain the attitude of this football field link structure out there could be used to actually change the attitude, not just from a yaw pitch roll, but actually move it around so that we could change it without using thrusters. And that became a huge asset to us because we don't need as much prop on the station. And because I'm a biochemist, I love the fact that we recycle as much as we can, including urine and all the other condensate waste, water waste. We recycle that and use it again. And we need that if we're ever going to go to Mars or any other long, extended duration missions. We have to be able to recycle water at 100%.
Well, we need the same sort of ability to recycle water and make good use of water on Earth. I mean, I do think it's pretty interesting. The obstacle you described is putting together a football-sized space station that's never been pre-fit, flying around the globe at 17,000 miles an hour, and having the belief that it's gonna come together and it's gonna all work out. And by the way, hey, I'm willing to live there for 6 months, 9 months at a crack. Um, uh, some good, pretty unimaginable examples there. You know, Matt, closer to earth, what sort of things do you see as these obstacles that provide challenges to overcome or great opportunities to do things differently in the future?
Got it. So I don't quite know how I follow space, right? So, but we'll see. So I think when we look at obstacles, one of the biggest challenges that we have, and I think a lot of this will resonate with a lot of you, is like the concept of dealing with government in any way, shape, or form. It's a very complex thing for those that may not necessarily know how to navigate those waters, right? And for us, I think changing the perspective for people that work in government to focus less on the things that the projects that they're working on discreetly, but focusing more on the cost of inaction is one of the biggest obstacles that we have. So when we got into, one of the things that I saw when we came into this administration in January of this year, is we took a look at the state of New York City as a whole. And one of the things that we found out very quickly was that about 40% of the people that live in New York City's public housing didn't have any access to broadband. Now, broadband is something that, you know, we're at AWS's, you know, reInvent, right? And I'm telling you that 40% of New York City's public housing doesn't have access to broadband. And we're coming off the heels of a global pandemic, right? Where we sent everyone home. So think about for a moment what that means to school-age children that walk into a house that are sent home to do school from home, but they don't have access to anything so they can do that, right? Or you give them a device and then you send them into a pre-war building and, you know, they get into that building and the moment that they walk through the door, that device can't connect. Then you flash forward and you look at the public safety condition in the city and then you wonder why are kids between the ages of 12 and 17 some of the leading people that are committing all this violence in the city? It's like when you take kids or you take people, you don't give them access to the tools and the resources that they need, and you don't focus programs around correcting those things, we create the conditions which leads to the things that we see today. So for us, I think, and for those that work in the technology space, especially those that work in the government technology space, what I tell everyone is like the programs that you work on and the things that you touch are more than just tech programs. You're actually moving lives forward in many different ways. So every day you don't do something, you have to take account of what that actually means. So I think the biggest obstacle, one of the biggest obstacles that we have is changing that mentality of this is just a tech program to these tech programs that we touch can change lives, can impact people, and we have to do something more about that. And the other thing that we're trying to do in that process is simplify how you interact with government as a whole. Just in New York City as a whole, for those of you who don't know, at the beginning of the year, we consolidated our tech entities. So in New York City, we had a Department of Information Tech and Telecom, which was a managed service provider for the agency. We had our New York City Cyber Command, which was focused on cybersecurity related activities, an Office on Information Privacy, and across the city, about 40 other tech arms that were disjointed. So at the beginning of the year, we took a look at how these tech arms were orchestrated across the city. And as we try to change that mentality from just doing tech programs to cost of inaction to driving efficiencies much quicker, we said, how could we do that when the system is as broken as it is right now? So in my office, when we created my office, the Office of the CTO, we took all of these discrete tech entities and we pulled them all into a single place. And now when we give direction and we create tech programs, we have line sight to, one, what we're delivering, who is it impacting, how quickly we're putting it out, and how we're measuring the success. And because of that, I'll give you a fun fact. One of the things that we saw in one of our largest agencies, they had, I think we identified about 10,000 devices that they had that were powered on, but had cellular devices that were powered on that were never used in the last 24 months, which accounts to about $24 million annually in city tax spend, right? That just by having consolidation and visibility, we were able to get that money and reappropriate it and use it to fund the program that gave free broadband to all of public housing, right? So that's the kind of stuff we're working on.
I think those are such great examples, Matt, because one of the challenges of leadership is understanding and sensing the opportunities for change. and recognizing that we were not setting up these young people for success, and then being able to take the right steps to make it work is exactly what leadership looks like. And then I think the other part of it that's equally valid is while we all are geeks, like Peggy said, it isn't just the tech that gets things done. And so your description of how you reimagine the organizational team that you needed to actually make it work and make it work for the city, I think those are two great examples of things that you have accomplished. But I'm really curious now about what happens when you look forward into the future. And when you take a look at the opportunity for disruption, we take a look at all the new services that we introduced here. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but if you think about the future of space, what are some of those things that you think are the disruptive events or disruptive opportunities that we've got?
I think there's going to be a ton of changes. Like we said, the space industry has taken off. We don't really predict everywhere that it can go. If you look long term, you might say, okay, satellite salvage might be important someday. Satellite refueling, satellite repair, lots of things that we don't have available now are going to take robotics and AI and lots of machine learning to do effectively in space. And I think it's really phenomenal, the amount of data that we're gathering. And if we gather the data, it doesn't really do us any good unless we can put it to use. I'm a dataholic, but it doesn't matter if you can't use it. So we have to be able to process it and use it effectively and efficiently on the ground. It's the only way we're going to understand really why we're here.
Yeah. Well, I think the opportunities are just amazing. I think that's one of the keys, though, is you just don't know what all of those things might be. And so leaders drive innovation, leaders empower people to experiment, and then you fail fast, and then you find the new approach that's going to work for you. Matt, you described a lot of things about what you have undertaken already, but when you look forward in New York City, and when you look forward to the sizable potential to improve the lives of citizens or kids, across all of New York City, what are some of the things that you see as those future opportunities or future challenges?
So I think we've got a ton of opportunity to leverage tech in ways to move the needle forward significantly for the people, not just in the city, but the people across the nation, right? So when you look at, like, just a good example, it's like in New York City, when we look at our population of people that are incarcerated, right, and we look at places like Rikers and the people that we have there, and the fact that about almost 30% of the people that are incarcerated are dyslexic, right? But they were identified as dyslexic when they got into prison, right? So now, how could we leverage technology to implement those sorts of screenings earlier on to ensure that as they enter the education system, they get the help that they need so they can relieve that frustration and that they can have a more proactive career path forward. In addition to that, I think of all the ways that technology's helped pull almost every facet of society. Look at COVID, right? Everything from telemedicine and what that's done in the near term. Look at remote schooling and what that's done in the near term, right? We don't have to look too far to see if we take the technology that's right in front of us now and we implement it in meaningful ways, we can really move the needle forward for society as a whole. And I think about some of the things that we've done of late on, like, the public safety end of the spectrum. So needless to say, in New York City, one of the things that a common theme these days is around public safety. The thing about safety is I could tell you that statistically, New York City is one of the safest cities in the world, right? It's a fact, we are. But you walk outside and you get punched in the face, you don't feel really safe, right? Right? It's this thing, right? So I think that the thing that we're challenged with is using the stats to say, well, here's a fact, these are what the numbers look like, but also creating that feeling and that sentiment of safety, right? And to do that, by far, we've used technology across New York City to bring crime down significantly. So when we look in areas where we've used things like gunshot detection, right? For those of you who don't know, we have most sound, percussive, concussive sounds. We have audio detectors across most of New York City in our high violence areas that detect gunshots. Now, what we did is, in addition, in areas where we have ShotSpotter, gunshot detection, what we find is that in 90% of the cases when we respond to a ShotSpotter activation, there's no 911 phone call that accompanies it, but we collect ballistics off the ground, which means a shot was actually fired there. So then what we actually do is, in addition to having that ShotSpotter, the detection system, we also put cameras out so that not only can we hear that something went off, now we can see who's perpetrating that, so that we can have a more effective mechanism when we go out to actually engage the community to say, hey, we're looking for this person, here's the video, and it creates that more of a community engagement model. So to your question, it's like we can use a lot of the technology that currently exists. I think we unfortunately these days, especially on the government end, we aren't very swift to get that done as quick as we could.
Yeah, well, Matt, the thing that strikes me is the way you keep drawing it back to missions and outcomes. Not just the tech piece, right? Every single case you described there was really about understanding what's underlying the circumstances, and then applying tech to get some outcome that you're shooting for. In fact, I have the great opportunity, because I work with customers around the world, to get to hear similar stories all over the world. And one that I'm reminded of is when I was in India recently, and I got to talk to an agri-tech organization called Cropin. And they very much looked at the situation of farming in India, where it's not just commerce, but it's actually the thing that's going to deliver on better food security as well as better lives. Some 7 million farmers. And what Cropin did was they took a lot of open source data, they understood the problem at hand, they understood how the small farmers were really going to be able to use the data, and then they took it and they put it together in a way that individual farmers on over 16 million acres of land could increase their production output, could identify and take the right actions on disease or drought conditions. And it wound up making a huge difference to all of those farmers. Huge difference in food, much better economic outcomes, but really it was that focus on the farmer and the outcome that they were shooting for. And with that, if I can, Peggy, we've got a lot of challenges in the world, these days to face. And the space industry and space technology is one that is actually coming into its own in terms of helping to respond to disruptive events or helping to avoid those events in the future. Can you share a couple of insights into how we keep using space to make life better here on Earth?
Yeah, we on the space station, for instance, have hardware that looks out and into deep space, looking for dark matter, and that's going to help us potentially understand the future of the physics that we experience here on Earth. But more directly, we have a lot of instruments that look at the Earth. They're looking at dust, they're looking at ocean waves, they're looking at smoke. They're calculating all different kinds of things and trying to do the research that over long term we can determine what might be causing climate change or contributing to climate change, and how to maintain some environmental sustainability, along with just, helping our planet Earth understand how it works and what the changes are occurring down here. Obviously, if there's conditions like floods or hurricanes or fires, then we can also take targeted photography and send that to people on the ground to help in a more short-term basis of here's where people, are going to need more water, or et cetera.
Yeah.
So it can help lives on Earth.
We were chatting the other day, and you also talked about the potential for manufacturing and developing new solutions in space to respond to requirements here on Earth.
Yeah.
Any other examples?
Well, from looking for new solutions, we do a lot of research on the International Space Station nowadays that looks at different disease states and how we might understand them better by making better crystals that we can then examine down to a subatomic level and then understand how they function. One of the coolest things I did on board the space station was looking at stem cells. And a lot of the stem cells we think can be used potentially in a lot of different, potentially cancer treatments or other treatments, but it's really hard to get stem cells in very large quantities. So we were growing stem cells to see how they proliferated in space. And some of them actually grew better. And so I'm a big advocate. I think we should grow stem cells in space and all to culture them.
All right, there we go. I have noticed something about meeting Peggy. She will volunteer for the toughest missions. But equally so, from talking with Matt, I know that he tackles the tough missions right here on Earth. You've heard about some of the ways that he's been working across the city to improve services and to increase accessibility, and in fact, to be able to serve all of the residents of New York City. How about your observations on things that you're undertaking in order to keep citizens, systems, or things protected in New York City?
Yeah, so I guess one of the tangible things that we can talk about, so I spoke a lot about what we're doing from a public safety perspective. But a different sort of public safety is what we're doing on the cyber front. So for those of you, we are at an AWS conference, so I gotta imagine that most of you are familiar with SolarWinds, right? Right? All right.
I think one or two would be safe.
Well, one or two at least, all right. For those of you who are not familiar with SolarWinds, though I'd find that hard to imagine, it was a cyber attack that was a supply chain sort of attack around a networking monitoring tool. And we had nation-state actors that penetrated a network monitoring company, got malicious code built into the application itself as part of one of its updates, and by deploying that update, they were able to infiltrate almost every US intelligence agency without being detected. And the only way that we found out about it was because Mandiant tripped over it. And they were bold enough to say that they were compromised, right? And if they had not, who knows how far that would have spread. So New York City, to tackle the sort of cybersecurity concern, we have New York City Cyber Command. Now, New York City, for those who don't know, like our tech estate, we're bigger than the banks, we're bigger than big tech, right? In terms of assets, we have over 1 million endpoints, right? And our workforce is somewhere north of 340,000 people. And daily, we see about 80 billion, our weekly average is about 80 billion cyber events that we distill down on a weekly average to about 50 incidents that we investigate to see what happens. Now, to do all of that, in the background, we use a lot of cloud services to both ingest that data, to enrich that data, and to assess the risk and threat that goes along with it. And for us, when we think about how we carry out that cybersecurity mission, in the beginning of the year, we launched the New York City, or the New York Joint Security Operations Center. Because for us, when we think about critical infrastructure, 90% of the things that the public considers critical, that you may consider critical, like think about your banks, your hospitals, your supermarkets, right? Your retail stores. Those things aren't controlled by the government, they're controlled by the entities themselves. And the government, we spend a lot of time protecting our own assets, but one of the things that we also have to protect are the things that the public finds critical for their operation, for their life, the quality of life. So by launching the Joint Security Operations Center, we've created a conduit where we can have a public-private partnership. Now, your average supermarket or your average store can't afford to invest in cyber like the city of New York can. So instead of you trying to figure that out on your own, come to us and let us help you figure that out together. And what you'll get is EDR. What you'll get is you'll give us some telemetry and we'll give you insights into what's happening on your end. And in the event that you get compromised, we'll be there to help you figure out how you get out of that situation. And when we look at security, just like from the physical policing aspect, on the cyber front, it's a act of community. And we can't do it, the government can't do it on its own. It takes both the folks outside and inside. So in helping secure those workloads, or helping secure like the tech estates, those are some of the things that we're doing.
Yeah, well, I'm curious about what you said earlier about reorganizing, how the city IT departments and cyber departments and others were interconnected, because I think it's actually very forward-leaning that you're thinking about cybersecurity in New York City to include all of the businesses, that operate in the city. Was it really important when you brought the team together? Did that help with any of those efforts?
Yeah, so definitely that was part of our phase one sort of assessment, right? Of this is something that we need to do. And especially in light of SolarWinds, remember that happened December
One
of
or
the
two
year
people
prior,
know about
right?
it.
When we started this administration in January, coming fresh off the heels of SolarWinds, we're like, cybersecurity has to be viewed at the same levels that we view physical security. So in New York, post 9/11, if you were in New York before 9/11 and you go to New York after 9/11, the feeling in New York in terms of security is very different, right? Just like when you go to the airport, it's very different. Now you have to take your shoes, your belt off. You can't smoke in an airplane anymore, right? Like all that stuff has changed. So in New York, post 9/11, what we created was a Lower Manhattan Security Initiative. What that focused on was talking to the big banks and owners of real estate in the city and said, hey, you guys have security assets like cameras, right? And you have metal detectors, and you have all that stuff. Share that telemetry, share that information, share that data with the police department. And in the event that there's a compromise, we can guarantee that there'll be faster access to law enforcement because they can see it as it happened and they'll have better situational awareness when they respond. That's only on a physical front. What happens when a cyber sort of crime happens in the city? It's like, how do we respond to something like that? So using our public safety parallels of how we deal with physical crime and looking at how we deal with cybercrime and trying to pull those two together to create parity was the thing that brought the fact that we need to bring the businesses in to help protect them, to help protect the city.
Yeah, I think it's another key thing that leaders do, which is, recognize those opportunities where they've found a pattern, and then can reapply that pattern, to continue to solve problems differently. And the example in cyber and cybersecurity, and then extending that out to the businesses, just as you did with physical security, is just one of those examples. Well, I happen to know that it's equally important to protect your information technology assets in space. And so let me turn to you, Peggy, and ask you, how is it that we're using modern, cyber to be able to keep and protect our assets in space and our intellectual property that is, as you pointed out, becoming super important as the economic activity and incentives step up in space?
So cybersecurity in space has always been important. You don't want people hacking your satellite and taking it over. You don't want people venting the oxygen out of your space station. So it's really important that we have some level of cybersecurity. I think the more investigators that we've gotten on board the station, there becomes that intellectual property has become more and more paramount, and there's a lot more confidential information that has to be downlinked and transmitted to the ground. And importantly, I think in the future, as we commercialize even more, we've got to protect that intellectual property, because these people are investing big amounts of money to try and develop something new, how we're using space to make new lenses for cataracts, for instance, or how we're using just the tools of what space offers as a way to make something that's less expensive or better when you make it in space. And so that protection of how those things get done is going to be that intellectual property of the company, and the success of commercialization of space is going to rely on that cybersecurity to protect that information.
I think it will be interesting where in years past, space was the domain of large governments and big organizations. Now it's going to be the domain of thousands or maybe tens of thousands of different organizations. And somehow I have this feeling that they're going to need to figure out how to do collective defense in kind of the same way that Matt was talking about collective defense in New York City, between the city and between businesses. So I'm sure that'll be an interesting area to develop. I also happen to know, as I know many of you all know, right, that training and skills are equally important to protecting information security and protecting assets and in fact, protecting our city, our space stations, or any of these other physical places. So Matt, I was hoping I could turn to you and hear about some of the ways that you're thinking about the workforce in New York City and helping to improve skills and training and capability in New York City.
Got it. So when you look at New York City, for those of you, again, just a little fun fact about New York City. New York City is the 10th largest financial power globally, right? If we were the nation, we'd be the 10th largest financial power, 10th largest financial country, right? So, and we managed to stay that while 40% of those that live in public housing didn't have access to broadband, right? So if we could improve that number, if we could improve the efficacy of our school system, if we could change some things where we could bring more people into the workforce, how much better could New York City actually be? So one of the things that we're doing, so in September, we launched a program called Big Apple Connect. And that program was focused on putting broadband in all of public housing. Now, to follow on with that, what we're doing also in public housing is working on building digital literacy and skills training in public housing itself. So when you think about the conditions that we put people into, after the pandemic, people were laid off. And how are most jobs recruited these days? Most recruitment's done online, most job applications are done online, but people don't have access to that. And let's say you spent your life working a specific career that now has moved on because that business is closed in New York. Now, how do you get upskilled so that you can rejoin the workforce, right? People don't want to be orphaned and they don't want to sit at home. I mean, many don't, maybe some do, but by and large, it's like, how can we get them the skills that they need where they need it? So to do that, we're bringing skills programs into the housing developments themselves, into our public libraries, so that if you want to build a new skill, you can come to those locations and do that. And now, as we move into the new year, we're looking to evolve that to say, now that you've built that new skill, how about you come and join the city's workforce, right? And for us, New York City is a large employer. We have, hundreds of vacancies. It's like, you can come in, get a decent paying job, you live here, help influence the machine that controls the city that you live in. In addition to that, we look at our existing city workforce, and one of the things that we've launched of late is our cyber academy, right? Now, our cyber academy, we work very closely with the FBI, and we looked at the FBI and folks like Mandiant, and we said, hey, how do you take federal agents that may have done a tour in financial crimes, and now they're trying to learn about blockchain and crypto, and they're trying to figure out how to be, cybersecurity and digital analysts. How do you take those people and you train them in tech in such a way that they become proficient enough where they can be a regulatory force in that space? And we took that curriculum in New York City, we created a cyber academy. Now, cyber talent across the nation, it's a bit of a challenge in almost every industry, especially in government. And on the government end of the spectrum, we don't typically pay as well as places like Amazon. So instead of trying to recruit or attract high-tier, high-level talents, why not build the capability internally? So what we did across the agencies is we went across every city agency, we identified one individual in every agency, and said, we will provide you a cyber specialist in every agency, train them up to the same level that the FBI trains their resources up to, and redeploy them. So if you ever have an issue, you at least have one resource that can work in conjunction with the city cyber command to help you sort out whatever's happening there. Now, we've done that with cybersecurity. We will do the same thing with network engineering. We're doing the same thing with our cloud partners, so that across the city's workforce, we can continue to build those skills. And by having an academy, the best part about it is it doesn't matter if we lose a couple of people. As long as you keep the class and the curriculum going, you can continuously bring people in. So as you lose people, you just have other people that graduate up the pipeline. So you're not in this perpetual cycle where you keep fighting for talent.
I think the interesting thing about that, again, as leaders out here, is there's not just one size fits all, one way of doing it, and it is about reskilling oftentimes. And at AWS and Amazon, we're trying to do our part in that same vein on reskilling and upskilling. We introduced cloud curricula for our AWS Academy so that it's taught through universities. We partner with community colleges. We made a commitment a couple of years ago to provide no-cost skills training for over 29 million people around the world. And we're doing pretty good. We're headed toward 2025 to hit that goal, and we're at 13 million now. But there's always so much more that you need to do. And building talent inside, I think, is something that all organizations are going to need to have a plan around, because trying to just recruit it from outside, feels like you're just trying to draw from too small a pool. Well, I really appreciate the insights you've given us into your careers, into the things that inspired you and drove you, and some of the different changes that you went through. But as we wrap up here, I'd like to ask you all just both one final question and your thoughts for the audience here, who has been a great audience and stuck around right here. Because I happen to know we're in Las Vegas, and there are a handful of other distractions that are out there. So I want you to leave this audience on a high note, and just, Peggy, we'll start with you. But give us one thing when you think of the next couple of years as a leader in space. What is the out-of-the-world advancement that you think we'll see?
One thing. Gosh,
okay, fine,
that's
two. If you
hard. I think that right now the opportunities are really as limitless as space is. I think there's so many things out there that we don't know about yet. And as we start populating more areas of space, there's just going to be huge opportunities. But I think I'd like to see the advancement in the pharmaceutical area to help people with therapeutics here on the ground. And I think that's a very doable, reasonable expectation. And we're going to need lots of data resources to enable this type of thing to continue in the future.
That's great. Space for health. I love it. There's a good one. Matt, I'm going to turn to you. The final out-of-this-world advancement when all of these folks travel to New York City in the next 3 years.
Well, the next 3 years, huh? So New York City currently is number 2 for a tech startup across the globe, right? So right behind Silicon Valley. And I think within the next 3 years, if not 3 years, certainly within the next decade, that my hope is that New York City eclipses Silicon Valley as the tech hub for the globe. Like, that's my hope.
Yeah, at Amazon, one of our leadership principles is think big, and we say that thinking small is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I'm super glad that I was able to sit here and have you both join me. You're both big thinkers. You're both pushing the limits. And so thank you very much for joining us and for this great conversation.
Thank you.
To everybody that hung in here, I know you all are leaders too. And I hope that this session helped you think bigger about what's possible, maybe gave you some ideas to take that back to your organization or your small business if you're a startup, or your university or government anywhere around the world. I think we're just scratching the surface on what we can accomplish together. We've got this spirit of innovation. We've got all of these new tools at our hand. So I hope you enjoy the rest of reInvent. Be sure to visit our public sector pavilion that's here in the Venetian if you want to learn more about what AWS is doing and what some of our public sector sponsors that are bringing this to you are doing. They have great solutions. It's a perfect place to evaluate build versus buy. They can help you move faster. And then also, if you have a chance, stop by our Public Sector Industry Lounge. It's over at the Wynn Hotel. And the value for doing that is you get to talk to individual experts about the things that are on your mind that you want to change or places you want to drive innovation, and have that sort of one-on-one conversation with them. So me personally, I look forward to connecting and collaborating with everybody here. I hope we get the opportunity to do this again soon. And so let me just say finally, thank you. And to everybody here, take care and have a great evening now. Thank you.
Thank you.